Hi, it's Gwyn and welcome back to the Revolver Beatles Channel. And I promise you there's going to be no talk about anthology, nothing to do with Power to the People and that song, nothing to do with cash grabs. We're going to leave that all behind us this week. This week we're going to look at the Grey Market. Have you ever seen a Beatles record for sale that looks official but doesn't quite look legit? Well, welcome to the mysterious world of the Grey Market, a strange place between legal and illegal. So first off, what are Grey Market albums? Well, they are unofficial products that are not outright counterfeits, but also not fully authorised. They are often created when copyrights expire in certain countries or when material is released without the full label approval. They're legal in some jurisdictions, but still frowned upon by rights holders. So what are the pros and cons of Grey Market albums? Some of the pros are that they are the only way to hear some of these unreleased or rare performances. They're often also cheaper than official releases. They can also be fun curiosities to add to a collection and a way to expand your record collecting experience above and beyond those that are officially released from Apple. What are some of the cons though? Well, audio quality can be poor, often copied from either radio or TV sources. They can be very dodgy in terms of hi-fi resolution. You have to have your wits around you, to be honest. In certain instances, there's no guarantee of authenticity here. And some of the information included on these releases is sketchy at best. Also, the money from these releases doesn't go to the artists or their estates. Now, I've picked up 3 of these albums recently, 3 performance albums. Here we go. We've got, first off, the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, the Beatles live in Stockholm 1964, and the Beatles live from Adelaide in 1964. So let's have a bit of a dive into these 3 particular albums and see exactly what we're getting for our money. So each of these albums that I purchased for just over 20 quid a pop, they're all on the Rhythm and Blues label and represent performances from the year 1964, all in mono. The first of these is the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, performances from 1964, and includes the following tracks: All My Loving, Till There Was You, She Loves You, I Saw Her Standing There, and I Want to Hold Your Hand from their February the 9th, 1964 performance. Also recorded on this day, but not transmitted until February the 23rd, are Twist and Shout, Please Please Me, and I Want to Hold Your Hand. Side 2 mainly consists of the 6 tracks recorded and transmitted from their performances in Miami on February the 16th, 1964. And these tracks are She Loves You, This Boy, All My Loving, I Saw Her Standing There, From Me to You, and I Want to Hold Your Hand. This is an historic time capsule from the 1964 Ed Sullivan shows that introduced the Beatles to the US. And the sound quality, while not perfect, is actually really, really good. Clear, precise, pretty good mix overall, and captures some great performances. John's rhythm guitar on All My Loving is a thing of beauty, and the harmonies throughout are tight. And Ringo, he doesn't miss a beat. And George delivers faultless solos. Paul is clearly enjoying himself immensely and adding additional haze and woes throughout the proceedings. It's a really, really good performance and show, and on this album, it's really, really good. The specially invited audience that were present at the DeVille Hotel shows in Miami, while enthusiastic, don't match the raw enthusiasm of the New York audience. But this gives us a special opportunity to really appreciate and savour the fabulous harmonies on tracks like This Boy and From Me to You in particular. The vinyl on this is 180 gram, without blemish, and I love the sleeve design. I think it's really complementary to the early styling of Beatle albums in the early 60s. The fonts match beautifully, some nice pictures on the reverse of the Beatles with Ed Sullivan. Overall, this is a really nice product. I even love the cheeky Emitex cleaning material logo that is placed on each of these albums, actually. And when you see it, I wonder where they got the inspiration to have a black and silver record label with a yellow heading. So for me, this gets 3.5 stars. Next up is this, the Beatles in Stockholm 1964. And well, this is a real mixed bag in every respect. Firstly, the album highlights songs from a performance at the Stadium Johannesshow, Stockholm, on July the 28th on side 1 of this album. Now, there is some good news and bad news here. The good news is that the sound recordings by Swedish TV was excellent. The bad news, however, is that the stage mics of John and Ringo weren't working for these performances. So you get to hear really clear performances from Paul and George, but John is but just a whisper on You Can't Do That, and Ringo on I Want to Be Your Man is lost behind Paul and George's backing vocals and his own crashing of his cymbals. It's a real shame those mics weren't working, because the show as a whole is really good and would have been a really great recording otherwise. Side 2 is varied and does not conform to the Live in Stockholm theme at all. Songs 1 to 4 are from the Rediffusion television special recorded at Wembley Park Studios here in the UK on April the 28th. The backing tracks were pre-recorded and the band sang to the playbacks. The show, however, does include a 4-minute medley of their first 5 UK hits, and would turn out to be the last time that the Beatles would perform Love Me Do and Please Please Me live. Tracks 5, 6 and 7 are bizarrely extracted from the Washington Coliseum show in the US on the 11th of February 1964. Those tracks being I Saw Her Standing There, I Want to Be Your Man and She Loves You. Pretty random, eh? To be honest, this is classic Grey Market fare, loosely cobbling together a bunch of tracks to fill an album and presenting a variety of quality in the recordings themselves. The record sleeve, well, you get the deliberate and calculated design choices over fonts, for example, matching those of the original Beatles LPs. You also have to make some allowances as well, because the writing credits for Twist and Shout and Roll Over Beethoven are reversed. Due to the obvious faults in the recordings of the Stockholm show, something like this would never officially see the light of day. Yet, as a piece of history, it has merit which shouldn't be overlooked, and for the diehards out there, it deserves a place in many a collection. As a rating though, for this album, I'm going to give it 2.5. The third and final album we're going to look at is this, the Beatles Live from Adelaide in 1964. This album does maintain an Aussie theme right the way through, with side 1 and the first 2 tracks on side 2, that's 10 tracks in total, representing the performances by the Beatles at the Centennial Hall, Adelaide, on June the 12th, 1964. This was recorded by 2SM, a Sydney radio station, who did a pretty good effort, but as we'll see, not a perfect effort at capturing a balanced mix of a really great show performance. Now, on the night, there were 3,000 people in attendance, who were the lucky ones of the 50,000 who applied for tickets. And 300,000 fans also filled the streets of Adelaide between the airport and the city centre as the Beatles made their way to the show. The show is notable for being one of the 8 performances that Jimmy Nicol stood in for Ringo while he was hospitalised with tonsillitis. But sadly, the reason why the recording isn't closer to perfect is due to the fact that Jimmy's drum kit didn't have a microphone set up on the show. Despite this, the show is a really great performance, with George's guitar work really hitting the mark on each song, and Roll Over Beethoven in particular is fantastic, and the harmonies are brilliant all the way through. Once side 1 is flipped over, The opening tracks on side 2 are actually the closing 2 numbers of the show, Twist and Shout and Long Tall Sally, and each are delivered with full throttle, throat-tearing energy by John and Paul respectively, and are magnificent. The rest of side 2 is filled with an Adelaide press conference with John, Paul, George and Jimmy, and other songs from shows in Melbourne and Sydney later on in the tour. The final songs are captured as part of a Sydney newsreel, and the recording quality is truly awful actually. The listener is challenged to hear much of some of the songs over the intense screaming and in certain instances interruptions by the news recorder. Now, the album features some nice photos of the Australian tour on the back cover here. Again, the quality of print and finishing on this album is pretty good actually, and while not spectacular, is pretty decent enough for from a Grey Market perspective. Each album has one of these inner sleeves, which also has other albums in the series and available on the Rhythm and Blues label, very much replicating the inner sleeves of other record companies during the 60s. For me, this album gets a solid 3 stars. So all in all, these 3 LPs are flawed and varied, yet they're exciting and compelling listening, to be honest, much like the other Grey albums I've invested in over the last few years. For their obvious faults in the recording processes, they will just have to suffice until MAL technology can be used to optimise some of these shows to such a point when Apple may consider, maybe, a release of live songs in a compilation format. But I'm not going to hold my breath for that. And to be honest, after recent events, I think it wise not to predict what Apple might be doing in the future. So I have to say, I really enjoy having albums like this on my shelves and in my collection. And while I might not return to them as often as official releases, I think they certainly have their place. And they tell a part of the story of the Beatles that is missing from the official albums. There are plenty of Grey Market albums available either directly from the label and even on Amazon here in the UK. I've also seen them in plentiful supply at various record shows and fairs over the years. So, have you bought any of these Grey Market albums? And if so, what are your thoughts? Do you think they have a legitimate place in the collections of Beatle fans? Which concerts highlight the best of the Beatles live? Should the Hollywood Bowl concert be left as the sole representation of the Beatles live in concert? Please leave your thoughts and comments down below. Can I just say a massive thank you to all of you who have subscribed recently to the channel. And for those of you who aren't, there's nothing to pay, and clicking on that button below really helps the channel, as does a thumbs up or a share. Well, that's about all for this video. There's plenty of new content coming down the track, so stay tuned, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Until then, bye for now.